This is great to see you. Thanks for joining us. I see Anna's iPhone. I see Joan's iPad, Judy, William, Sally, Barbara, Mark, Jean, Diane. I love it. A lot of these people, I see your face. Rocky, I always see you. I just love it. Do me a favor, move your mouse, go to the bottom of the screen. You'll see the green screen share button. Go to the left, click on the chat box. Okay, Dane's nodding his head. He's done this a little too often. And I see Rocky just said hi. Liz says hello. Tell me what your name is, where you're from. Just first name, where you're from. And I'd love to know because we get people from all over. We have about 120 people that have registered for this webinar, which I'll be honest with you, we were actually, sorry guys, we were thinking of canceling it because we thought nobody's going to be here for the July 4th weekend. And we looked and it was like 80 people had already registered. I'm like, nope, I think we need to do this. So we've got all these people: Sue from Jersey, Rocky from California, Diane from Iowa near Des Moines, which means she's not in the city. So we've got wonderful people that are joining us. Thank you for coming on. This is your webinar. So this means if you've got any questions, suggestions, things that you've wanted to, if you want us to touch on, what I want you to please do is write it in the chat box because we will bring it up. We watch these things. We've got wonderful presenters tonight. We've got Dane Robinson. He's certified by NASM. He's held almost every job in the fitness industry. And by the way, he looks really, really hot in that headband. He impacts hundreds of people in private and group training classes, thousands of people across the country with the show, The Daily Burn. And he's an amazing fitness coach and has been presenting with us for a long time. And I will tell you, he's a great business coach. He's got a wonderful program and he helps a lot of personal trainers and individuals who are looking to go into business. I highly recommend working with Dane. Maurice Williams is rather new to the SCW family, and he's got a BS and an MS. He's not full of BS though, in exercise physiology. He's got 23 years of experience in the fitness industry, 7 years of teaching fitness professional. He owns 2 businesses, one that's online and one that also helps instructors get certified, and it's called Move Well Fitness and Move Well Fit Academy. And he's also a professor of health and human performance at Freed Hardeman University. He's not just a pretty face, he's really smart. Okay. And Alexis is absolutely adorable. She's one of my favorite people. She is the founder of Chair One Fitness, and it's about training people in a chair. Love the logo. Training. She's also been a sponsor. Like I think this was at Active Aging, like some time ago. Very wonderful program that she does for active agers in chairs, and she just kind of discovered this and evolved it. Look at her. I don't know if she's over 22. But she's passionate about fitness, media, and business. She is hosting We Are Living Healthy. It's on Your View. And she also became a producer and instructor for Fusion Fitness and Body by Alexis. And she's coordinated events and things like that. And we've got Deborah Atkinson with us, which I'm really happy about. I was so pleased to see Deborah present at the Athletic Business Show. Do you remember that, Deborah? And I was sitting in the back of the room, and I swear, I stepped over people and ran up to the front of the stage and said, "You're fantastic." And she's a wellness coach, hormone balancing fitness expert, best-selling author with over 3 decades of full-time fitness experience. She's the founder of Flipping 50, which I love that name. She's a podcast host, a TEDx speaker, and she's presented at several Mania events. So we're really excited about this. I am going to ask, we have a wonderful Chris Purple with us. He helps with all our development for SCW, and he will be helping us host this. He's going to put links in the chat box to stuff going on, and will also hopefully make me aware of some of the questions that may arise. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, as we age, the core proprioception, balance, they all become more important to prevent falls, to maintain proper gait, to keep us active. And with core work often comes floor work, which means we've got to get older adults that on the floor. And for other individuals who it might be uncomfortable for anyone. So let's think about what core work we can do off the floor, which is very important for us. So Dane, I'm starting with you basically because I covet the headband. All right, here we go. How does strengthening the core improve balance and prevent falls?
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Happy Thursday or Friday Eve and everything. Fresh out of the trench, hence the headband. But headbands aside, we're talking about core training. The idea is that, again, it's the reason why we call it the core. Just like our planet Earth, like there's a core that helps keep us balanced so we don't rocket out of orbit here. It's the same thing that we want to focus on for whether it's our active aging clients, our weekend warriors, heck, our youth athletes at the end of the day. This drives so much about, number one, about how we start and how we stop, how we change direction. We move in a 3D world, but we should also just think about focusing and targeting our core first, especially in our programming, is starting with that, lighting that up, creating integrity there, not just putting it at the end of our programs to where it's just like this fun pop, it's this fun, sexy thing to do at the end, and we can make people feel really good. We can, but we want to have a little bit more integrity with making sure people are not only performing, but moving well.
Yes, and I love that foundation. I think that's wonderful. You know what I forgot to do? I always forget to introduce myself. My name is Sara Kooperman. I'm the CEO of SCW. I just got a phone call from Max Roth, I'm Max Roth's mother. That's who I am. I'm Sam's mother, Louie's mother, Zach's mother, and Max's mother. And yes, I'm one of these aging population, 62 years old, trying to avoid getting down on the floor doing sit-ups. Now, Maurice, how do you think strengthening the core improves the balance and prevents falls?
Well, if you think about where the core is located on our body and the fact that certain parts of your core are attached directly to our spine, and hopefully we all understand the importance of our spine in terms of posture and keeping us upright. The fact that it is connected directly to it, and then you have, which we call our local muscles, our deep muscles, and then you have global muscles, which kind of connect off of those muscles. Then it's important for us to train those muscles just based upon where they're located. And as Dane mentioned, the fact that any movement that we do initiates or it starts with the core. So those are the biggest reasons why it's important. As we get older, sometimes we tend to lose our posture a little bit. Our body position changes. But if we are addressing, from a gravity standpoint, if we're addressing those muscles on a regular basis, not only on a regular basis, but in the right way, then we can ward off or avoid some of these issues that we have as we get older.
Alexis?
No, I was just so glad that he said about everything being connected and involving the spine. Personal story, one time I had a lumbar strain in my back, and that was the biggest reality check. Because when you think about the gym, you're like, leg day, back day, right? And when my back went out, it didn't matter how strong my arms were. It didn't matter how strong my legs were. I was on the floor. End of story. And the first thing that my therapist told me was, we're going to need to strengthen your back and we're going to need to strengthen your core. And then as I dive deeper into Chair One Fitness, I was privileged enough to be on a Zoom call with 5 paraplegics who had different spinal cord injuries, depending on if it was neck down or waist down. And the ones who did have some feeling in their core, they were like, it is so important that our core is strong, because that's what enables us to get up out of our chair, get back in the chair. And it's amazing how we take it for granted, even though it's one of the most important parts of the body that keeps us mobile. So I was just really glad that Maurice tapped on how it's all connected to the spine. And I did just want to share how, that personal story of you think your body's all great until you have a injury in that area.
Yes. And I always think of, when do I need my core? Like when I'm laying on the ground, sitting up, like how often do I do that? Once a day in the morning when I get up out of bed. If I take a nap, it's going to happen again. And I don't know, if the dog needs to go out and I've been laying on the couch. Deborah, please share with us.
Yeah. I'd love to share just to embellish what everybody else said, really. But with older adults, we use 3 systems for balance. And quite often, the vestibular system, there are a lot of inner ear issues that occur, after 50 and sometimes before. But visual also, we're not seeing as well as we did, depending on how old you are. And the one left is core. So it's almost as if we lose those other 2, we really need to strengthen the core more. My 94-year-old mother should be doing more core probably than me.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, definitely. It's just, how do we get them to do anything? How do we, I can't get my children to listen to me, let alone parents to listen to us. They, even though we're the expert, we're still 12 years old in their eyes. What equipment is appropriate to integrate into core work for mature adults? Now, I have to start with you, Alexis, because chair 1. So what equipment do you use, and how do you integrate it?
For our Chair 1 Fitness, all we use is the chair because it allows them to be seated while they're working their core. This is great for anybody who has any balance deficits like vertigo. It's great for anyone who might need a mobility aid. It's better for them to be seated. I actually had one of my seniors who had a brain aneurysm, and I thought that they were never going to come back to class. This was a standing class that I was teaching at the time. And then when he was able to come back to class, he was able to come to the seated class, because if he ever fell again, they said it would be catastrophic. So they said if he's seated, he can do it. So for me, I mainly just use a chair, but if somebody really wanted to work their core, they could use a chair and or a lightweight. There are so many different movements. I know it's kind of hard to see with my screen just right here, but as far as if you're seated, if you have a chair with arms or without arms, like I'm sitting on a kind of bar stool thing right now, but there's so many movements that you can do. Even if it's just extending the arm and reaching out to one side and holding it. If you do that with a small weight or no weight at all, you'll actually feel it in your obliques and you'll feel it in your core. There's so many different things that you can do without having that risk of falling. So my go-to is a chair, but in general, there are some light-weighted things that you can do. If you're at a gym and you have the pulley, if they have a strong core, then they can pull it down and do that standing. Or if it's the other piece of equipment where you could latch on and raise your legs up, those are all decent pieces of equipment that don't require somebody to go all the way down to the floor.
That's great advice. Maurice, we're talking about the core, and the core is not just isolated in the abs. So I'm always of the opinion that you almost have to train your back to your abs 1. So it's almost either 2 to 1, or sometimes as we age 3 to 1, just because of the kyphosis, the rounding of the upper body and the forward head. That looks real attractive. So what are your recommendations regarding training?
When it comes to, in reference to the equipment, just my opinion on that, what equipment to use. So I prefer equipment that is, you can easily buy it, doesn't cost that much. You can do it from anywhere, and it's easily accessible. So any sort of bands are great to use, medicine balls, anything that's going to allow the seasoned adult to be able to do stabilization sorts of exercises. So like a Pallof press, any type, or anti-rotation, anything that's going to allow them to do chops or any type of rotations. And then the medicine balls, because they can come in lightweight. As we know, just as we need power, our older adults need power as well. So medicine balls and bands are great to use for power type of exercises. And we're just talking about moving your own body weight or moving weight fast. And if we're moving it fast, obviously we know we can't use that much because of the inverse relationship there. So those are some of the pieces of equipment that I like to use, and exercises that I like to use as well.
What I love that you brought up 2 things. I love that you bring up speed, because there are times you got to dive, our older adults may have to dive in, grab a grandchild. It's not just, we're always going to train slow and we're always going to be ultra careful. Yes, you need to be careful. We need to prepare, but we also need to prepare for life, activities of daily living. And I love that you brought up med balls, and I saw Dane kind of like getting all excited. So I'm going to go over to him. But when I think of med balls, I think also, I don't want to be gripping something so tight that due to my arthritis or that I just don't have the same strength in these smaller muscles, when I'm trying to work my core, which is, you know, from the shoulders, front of my body and back of my body, all the way down to my hips. So I like that I can use something different. Dane, what other equipment are you using? And how are you using it? I know I brought up the 2-to-1 thing, and you and I are pretty symbiotic in that regard.
Oh my God, everybody's speaking my language. Man, I tell you what, between Sara, you know, talking about the 2-to-1 relationship between posterior and anterior, that's always a quick guideline. Any of our fitness professionals, no matter what demographic you're working with, that's always a great rule of thumb and whatnot to create consistency in your programming, 2-to-1, posterior to anterior. But then also, again, you know, again, I got all excited because, you know, one of my favorite core movements that Maurice talked about, that Pallof press, that anti-rotation. Resistance bands are so key in medicine balls because, again, I felt like I was in that office with him. Because also, if you're working with an active adult that's, again, I train a 52-year-old and whatnot, and she can outperform some of my high school athletes. But again, it's because we use power. We use medicine balls. We work on just that asymmetrical load, especially when we're working with our bands. Another way to also integrate core off the floor with, if you have just, you know, again, everybody tends to have regular dumbbells in there, is going from a kneeling position. Is that, again, I would say when we talk about being on the floor, basically being in a full supine or full pronated position. But what we also can explore is if you're in a kneeling position, you can't create momentum from your lower body, say in like an overhead press, or say in a bicep curl. You can get somebody to really think about engaging and pressing their hips forward, squeezing their glutes, bracing their core as they extend these levers, whether it's a curl, whether it's a single arm overhead press. So just another way that I tend to go with some of my either older adults or youth performance athletes in saying that like half kneeling or full kneeling position is also core in an upright position.
Very nice. Yeah. It's great stuff. And I like that what you're doing is you're talking about young athletes as well as older adults. And sometimes we can have them do the same exercises with different influence. And that'll bring also a cognitive awareness to this. Deborah, what are your thoughts about integrating core work, you know, using different equipment?
Well, I think we all had a lesson in integrating different equipment in 2020. So your body does not know the difference between a dumbbell, a band, or something that we had to use a bungee cord from the garage or a backpack full of books, right? So, you know, I like to use anything and everything, and in fact, nothing. So there are a lot of older adults who it would be very prohibitive for them to go and have to buy something that they're fearful they would never use, or just not wanting to do it for space reasons. So a lot of times I'll change stance, you know, and have them use their core that way. So standing in a, you know, instead of parallel with feet directly under them, having them stand in a tandem, you know, as if they were on a balance beam. When they are able to adapt, we bring the heel and the toe closer together. So little things like that, having them stand close to a wall and work on bracing by pushing the foot into the wall, trying to push the wall over, or doing that even with your upper body, standing still, trying not to move over. It's another way of bracing and causing them to do a plank, but they're in an upright position.
That's great. I think sometimes we forget that merely trying to balance is a challenge. And just, I always talk about sometimes with some of my clients that don't understand the difference between like erector spinae and your rectus abdominis and the transverse. And what does the transverse do? It doesn't move any bones. It's not like your transverse is at the lower part of your abs. It doesn't fold your hips in and out, but it compresses and stabilizes. And when you're wearing a silk dress, it's the number one thing that you're sucking in. And if you can do that seated and you can do that when you're balancing, it's great. The only thing that does bring to mind is, and I'm gonna jump on, who am I gonna jump on? Maurice, you have to unmute yourself and I have to ask you this. I do think it's different working with weights as it is with bands, because I feel like when I'm working with tubes or bands, I get to that full range, and that is like a lot of work. And then it gets easier and easier as I come back. Whereas if I'm working with a hand weight, yes, I'm talking about the angle of my body, but it's not like the resistance per se gets harder. So are there certain things we might want to do that's precautionary with older adults using different equipment?
Sure. I mean, just the example of the, excuse me, the dumbbell. I mean, dumbbells are not really meant to, if you think about a dumbbell, it's really not meant for us to throw it or to move it relatively fast, just because by the design of it. So if we are going to use a dumbbell, we just have to be aware of that. If that's the only piece of equipment that they have, or if they feel comfortable using that, that gives them peace of mind, then you just need to be mindful of their positioning, just like we would do in general, their positioning and cueing. But if they're using, I mean, if they are using bands, then a lot of times bands are used or designed to move fast, as long as you're using some of the protective ones that are out there that are encased with what they have, an encasing that protects the actual band itself. So if it pops, it's going to pop on the inside, not on the outside. But if you're able to incorporate or use some of those things, then it'll be a little bit more helpful. So yeah, there is a big difference between being mindful of certain equipment and using it for reasons other than what it's designed for, as opposed to using equipment and what it's designed for. Yeah, so I would be cautious on that.
Okay, very cool. Dane, I know that you do some stuff with TRX, right? You do,
Yes.
and do you use that with your older adults? And how I love that Deborah brought up the body weight. That's that it's important to really use your body weight, but how can we use it effectively, especially with a TRX?
Yeah, so if we're talking with TRX, just like kind of the example that Deborah gave about like, again, I love the avenue of like using the wall, creating kind of that positive tension in an upright position. When we work with TRX, it's all about, again, we're talking about suspension training. And, I commonly refer to your core as like your suspension bridge. If you think about like the Brooklyn Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, by how that's designed, your core and your lower back, again, which is your core, kind of all work in the same way to kind of keep you like suspended and upright. So when we add in like something like a TRX strap, whether you're working through, and I saw a question on that 2-to-1 ratio, a great example, say with a TRX strap is, again, being able to say doing a TRX row without the hips hinging, where I do need to brace as I extend my arms and then I roll myself back in. So I'm working posteriorly there. Again, your non-mirror muscles. Another way that I can go through that is just, again, limiting where I'm at through the anchor point by just raising myself up. And I might go through a TRX fly, reverse fly, squeezing through the upper back again. So I have a pull, I have a fly, 2 posterior movements, and I can just do-si-do, as I would say, myself around and facing towards the floor. And I would just go into just a stabilization movement with our TRX into just a Superman hold. Again, they can always adjust, obviously, the closer to the anchor point or closer to the wall they are. Obviously, gravitational forces take hold, and obviously more kind of force comes on the lower back and core. But again, we can always start them in a little bit more upright, just to the point where they feel that positive tension in that suspension bridge there. So that's a good example of, say, if you're using TRX as your modality, TRX row, TRX reverse fly, do-si-do around, and go for a 30-second Superman hold. And there's your 2-to-1 quick programming.
And that's so important to think about the pushing, think about the pulling, and think about the stabilizing. And I think also we talked a little bit, Alexis, we talked about the rotation that you tend to use a lot because it works the obliques and even the QL, even the quadratus lumborum, a little bit in the back, please.
Yeah, no, there's definitely rotations and so many things that could be done. But I also wanted to say one very important thing with no matter what piece of equipment somebody is using is learning how to properly tell your clients, and even sometimes remember yourself, how to properly engage your core. There's so many people who don't actually know how. And just knowing those proper descriptions of, act like if I was going to hit you, if you had to brace for it, anything like that, engage it. If you're sitting up tight, engage it all the time, suck it in, hold it there. What is it? I know sometimes even if when I was personal training, if somebody was doing, you know, a standing up, just stand, just punch and just punch, I would sit there and just pat their stomach. I'm like, engage it, engage it, engage it. It was just the simple patting motion on their abdominals that made it tense up, which increased the intensity of the workout, which really put a lot of emphasis on the core. So I think that no matter what workout it is, letting the people know to remember to engage, giving them verbal cues of how they could resonate with how to do it. Even the other day, personally, I was at the gym and I was doing my lat pull downs. And at first I was just focused on my shoulder. I was focused on my lats, but then I was like, wait a minute, if I engage my core, I can actually feel it there too, if you just engage it. So I just wanted to say that about all the different things. If it's TRX, if it's on the wall, no matter what it is, telling your people exactly, look, no matter what we do, you need to know how to engage your core right now. Okay. And so that's all I wanted to add about that.
But that's great. But it's
can I jump in on that one too?
Also, sorry, Maurice, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. She brings up an excellent point. And it's important for us to teach our clients that there is a difference. There's a difference between drawing in and there's a difference between bracing. So if I go to, and I use this example all the time with my clients, and I say, look, I'm not going to do this, but pretend. If I go to punch you in the stomach, you're going to brace. You're just going to squeeze everything that you can to keep me. If I do hit you, obviously you don't want me to hurt you. That's different than, and using different muscles, right? We're using more global muscles when we do a bracing. So we're doing more rectus abdominis, more external obliques. But when we draw in, then we're using the deeper muscles that are attached to the spine. So what I usually tell people is if you were to just gently blow out through your mouth, like blow out a candle, or if I were to take like a piece of string, attach it through your lower back and pull, and I just gently lift you, then that's going to be your drawing in. So there is a difference between the two. Research shows if you're able to do both of those when you're performing exercise, they're better than if you just did one or the other. So just wanted to bring that up.
These are great. I love all the examples. And I know you say that you want that bracing. I'm like, you've never seen me in a silk dress. Yeah, I'm bracing the whole cocktail party. It's a little frightening. The next day, I swear, I feel thinner. Right, Deborah? Right?
That's so right. All the girls here, all the women knew exactly what that was.
We all did. And we're all sitting there sucking it in as we listen to this webinar. I know we are. The other thing that Alexis brought up, and I'm going to call you Alexis one sec. You know what she said? She actually touches her client. Now, of course, you guys know I'm a lawyer and I get a little bit nervous about touching, telling people, using the word prescription, et cetera, asking about medicine. I get very nervous about that. But if you just say, can I touch you? My yoga instructor today went and took a yoga class. She said, do you mind if I correct you? And I'm like, you touch whatever you want. But as a lot of people that get older, I know, Dane, you made a face, but a lot of people, when you get older, they're alone. And if you touch them, if you say, can I touch you? And you put a hand gently on their shoulder and you pat their abs, you know what? They're happy that someone connected. Seriously, we've been so disconnected for 18 months. It's not such a bad thing. So Alexis, I kind of interrupted you, please.
No, you're fine. I'm just glad that you mentioned touch in COVID. There's something that we talk about in Chair 1. I'm just going to share it. This is going to reveal all of my dorkiness at its finest, but I love it. We always say, of course, ask for permission or find out from wherever you're teaching if it's okay due to COVID regulations and things like that. But when it comes down to touch, it's cool what it does for the person. A lot of people who are older or empty nesters, things like that, their kids are out of the house, they might be widows, spouse might not be there anymore. It's amazing what happens with a gentle touch. We have this beautiful, beautiful chemical in our skin called oxytocin. And when you touch somebody else, it releases dopamine and serotonin into the brain, which makes them feel good. And many people try to deny science, but we see it all the time. That's why when you're scared or something like that, you know that your kids will brace your hand, or if it's in the middle of the night, they'll come lay next to you. Or when somebody's sad, the first thing you say is, give me a hug. And they all of a sudden feel better. So when you said that in the class, how like a touch can sometimes make people feel better, it really does. It really does. In a safe space, not in a naughty place, a safe space. I will say that. Don't be just patting people on the bum.
I love you.
Yeah, and
Right, we got a good question. Deborah, I'm going to throw this at you. Can you give an example of a 2-to-1 ratio where we were talking about making sure that, focusing on the posture? I'm all about training for spinal stability.
So a 2-to-1 ratio of training for spinal stability. Okay. So, if I were demonstrating my standing and I'm using the wall, for instance, I would actually stand and put my foot against it as if I were pushing against it. Now, is that back? Yes. Is it front? Yes. And is it like you've described, between the knee and the shoulder is all the core, but it's definitely not forward flexion, really, which is, we're all really good at that. We don't need more of that, right? We need to get some extension. We need stabilization, lateral flexion, and rotation. So I would do some pushing that way. You can do a wall sit. Almost everybody can, very gently, maybe not very low, but slightly down. Hips, shoulders, and head back with a neutral spine, sending mail, the ability to send mail through that lower back, if possible, not necessarily flat back. And that teaches them, what does it feel like to make that connection where your rib to hip connection is the same distance in front as it is in back. That's an easy one. And Maurice really hit on this. So I love the way teaching, and I would have to say, what does it mean to engage is like one of the number one questions I'm asked by women over 50. They hear instructors say it all the time and they're like, I'm embarrassed to ask, what does that mean? So, blowing out a straw, I often will have people put their hands on their rib cage and their hips and blow out until they're almost empty so they can feel what is that like when they've got the air all out the diaphragm. So that, and then forward flexion, I really don't include. Honestly, I leave it off, Sarah. So I'm a terrible example, but I will do back and I'll do stabilization all day. But I don't love forward flexion because I think we're all way too good at it.
And I agree. Amen, sister. I totally agree. When I teach my yoga class, I'm doing, and it's for active agers, and it's also for beginners to do yoga. I'm doing it Mondays and Fridays. I figure it's a great way to start your week and end your week. I'm going to ask Chris Purple to put it in. It's thetalenthack.com. And then it's /me and /Sara Kooperman. And I'm doing this class, it's free, but the money, if you donate, it all goes to charity. I donate to the YMCA in the Evanston area. It goes to help subsidize some underprivileged people for their residents. And I'm very dedicated, and who cares about that? The main thing that I do with my yoga class is I don't do the forward flexion. I don't have you hang onto your ankles or put your hands under your toes or, with the forward flexion, shoving your hands under your heels. The worst, I say, the most flex I do is a flat back where you hold your hands on your thighs or a downward dog. But we're flexed sitting at the computer, sitting at the cars, watching Netflix, which, by the way, Arrested Development is hysterical, just sharing. But it's this, and this is what people have been doing. So it's that extension. And I'm going to add this in, being very active ager focused, is a lot of times I find a focal point. In yoga, we call it a dristi. So if I'm trying to challenge my balance, I teach them to focus on a point, and then I'm going to get them to lift up, and then I can get them to rotate, and then I can even add in a flexion. But if I get that focal point, it can really work to train. And then what I like to train them to do as well is, if you're trying to balance, if you're trying to freeze, and you're running to get a grandchild and you're trying to hold them in place without falling over, you find a focal point then. It's not just for use in yoga, it's for use in life. So I think that those works. I love what you guys are bringing up. What precautions, if any, should I be aware of when training this demographic? Alexis?
I believe that there was a previous call where Maurice gave some great information on this, so I'm not going to steal his answer while he's right here, but he did speak about medications and things. I'm going to feel like
Feel
such
it.
a fraud. So I have my answer, which was what he didn't say, which was figuring out if they had any previous injuries and also what medications they're on. But since I know he answered this, I'm not just going to steal your answer. I'm going to let Maurice answer it, or I'm going to feel like a fraud because I'm not going to
All
just.
right, Maurice, you start, and then I'll shoot over to your girlfriend.
you.
Okay.
It's all right. We're all as one. We're all as one. So it's
I
all
know,
good.
it's cool. It's cool.
The two things that I mentioned that usually comes to mind with this question is, as you mentioned, many medications that they're on that we should be aware of based upon, hopefully we're doing PAR-Qs and health histories and those sorts of things, and getting the appropriate signing off by physicians and things of that nature. And then also along those same lines would be any musculoskeletal issues that they may have. So do they have any spinal issues? Do they have any other joint issues? Then we have to make modifications, where appropriate. So those are usually the two biggest ones.
And we spoke about this before we turn the webinar on, but again, I'm going to pull the lawyer card just because I get very nervous with all these people exercising, and we're so litigation happy. It doesn't mean that you could be absolutely right about what you've done and how you've done it. You can sue anyone, and you can sue anyone for anything. It doesn't mean you're going to win. It doesn't mean they're going to win, or you're going to lose, or they're going to lose. It doesn't mean. So I get very nervous. So when you do a PAR-Q, or you do those health history forms, what medications are you on, et cetera, you should always put an attestation clause at the bottom, which says, I attest that this information I am sharing is only going to be used for this initial interview and for these general recommendations. I'll put that in the recording thing for people, because we want to know what medicines are on, but I don't know what medicine, I barely know what a glass of white wine does to me, that I don't know what these, and I know, maybe I do know what a glass of white wine, I know what red does, but we have to think about that. And Maurice is absolutely correct. We have to understand who we're training, and we also have to go in, and you guys shouldn't be afraid to connect with a physician and find out what do they recommend. Get those health history forms, but also get those waivers of liability / informed consent forms from your client. And if you're dealing with active agers and you're nervous about their balance and their proprioception, I don't care who it is, you annually, every year in January, you get those forms. And I would tell you, after this pandemic, the whole world is kind of reacting like January. I've never seen the health club and classes getting more filled more quickly. And hello, it's July today. Yeah. So I think this is something we should think about. Are there any other precautions, Alexis or Dane or Deborah? Deborah's nodding, please.
I'm going to say that because I wanted him to answer first, because I don't want to accidentally steal his answer. But I know for me, sometimes working at gyms, and if you're doing anything with seniors that's in a group exercise environment, or sometimes when I go to train at the senior community, they're not always going to tell you exactly what conditions their residents may have because of HIPAA violations and things like that. So I just wanted to say, in those situations, it's not always knowing what they have, knowing what conditions they have, knowing what medications they're on, but knowing what to look out for. Knowing, like, if you see somebody where they don't have a lot of movement on one side of the body, okay, this person may have had a stroke. Or if somebody's 65 and you notice that when you're having them do a particular workout that they wince, you need to notice that. Is your shoulder okay? They might have arthritis. You don't know. If you notice that when a student is sitting down and they stand up and they have a little moment of dizziness, they might have vertigo. So sometimes it's not just knowing exactly what they have, but knowing how to identify, is this a vestibular balance disorder? Is this possible multiple sclerosis? What could they possibly have that I'm just noticing the symptoms, and then I can cater my workout to their reactions and to their symptoms that I see, even if I don't have all of that background information.
And sometimes with them, they're not even aware they have these issues.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So bringing it to their attention is really good. Deborah?
Yeah, for specifically, so I work primarily with women who are flipping 50. And so two big areas for them that also applies to males, but lower back injury is number one. I think we've kind of covered that and touched on it, but I think it's good to say again that 80% of adults in the United States have lower back problems. 80% of them have it recurring. So that's always something I think we want to be cautious of preventing it, not being part of the problem anyway. But for my population, prolapse is also a big deal. So it could be bladder, uterine, could be anal prolapse. So not a pretty picture. You definitely don't want to contribute to that. The things that have caused it are like large babies.
Can you define what the word prolapse means?
Basically means those body parts are exposed and hanging out. Literally, we've got some weakness. And so with additional pressure, the uterus and part of it could actually come through the vagina. So, wow, we just got sex ed here too. Did you know we were going to get that? Alrighty. So where's the wine? So with additional pressure, and this is a great argument for let's just leave crunches and sit-ups in the 80s where they belong and start moving on to better movement or stabilization, because that kind of work actually contributes to the lower back issues too. So these populations definitely, they're also concerned about pelvic floor damage. May have happened because of surgery, may have happened because of big babies, and or excess weight is still contributing to it, not helpful. So they need bracing. They need to learn what does it mean to engage core, but they need much more creative than traditional conventional ways that they've been taught and that are stuck in their head. So they need to unlearn and relearn.
I love that you brought it up. I mean, nobody's saying it, but we're all thinking Kegel, you know,
Yeah.
and we're all thinking and in a Kegel, we talked about some great ways to cue, but for a Kegel, it's like bracing the vaginal canal and lifting and tightening. You can do an elevator, first floor, second floor, third floor, and slowly, so this is almost like an eccentric contraction, second floor, first floor, and then hope that nobody goes to the bathroom in your class. I taught pregnancy and exercise for way too long. I have 4 kids, so it's like, you know, that's, yeah, talk about.
And you can actually create a great trilogy if you can get pelvic floor, recruit the core, get the inner thigh going together, and have them breathe. That would be really good.
And we're all sitting here in our chair. Men can do this too, guys. You can do a Kegel as well. We're sitting in our chairs, and I don't know how we're still talking. Anyway, are there any
who does a Kegel every time somebody says Kegel? If somebody says Kegel, it's my natural reaction to do a Kegel. I'm like, yeah. So sorry, I just want to say, I hope I'm not the only one who does that. Because whenever somebody says Kegel, when you started doing your elevator, I'm sitting here like, and 1, 2, 3. I was right there.
I did it too. I did it right now.
Yep, I did it too. I was doing it too, especially on the ladder.
God, that headband is way too tight. All right, but we've got, are there any contraindications to core work we should be aware of? Oh, now you're taking it off. Don't even try to please me.
It's a hot mess. It's a hot mess.
It's not a hot mess. You're gorgeous. But are there any contraindications to core work that we should be aware of, Maurice, that you can overtraining, you know, working the core so much that our posture is negatively affected? And again, we don't only think of the core as being the abs. Anyone?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, Deborah, please.
Just to state what I think we'd all know is, I mean, a recent surgery. I mean, there are plenty of, you know, options where potentially even bracing is not appropriate yet until you've been given the right of way and you've got consent.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. And this is great. Pam just shared, my class called me the Kegel Queen. When I took Lamaze, I did not understand the elevator at all now. And she's a nurse. So it is interesting. I mean, it's part of your core, guys. And then how can I implement or integrate these core exercises into my specialty bar or cycle programs. I can't even believe Mountain Time, it's 5:45, but I can't believe we're out of time. So any quickies on that? Any how can I add these into my bar work, my cycle work, my anything?
I would just toss in there, guys. Again, start with core, start with stabilization. We talked about clients not understanding like what does it mean to brace the core. Well, allow them to do that in the beginning, or when you get into say your bigger chain movements later on in your workout, no matter what that is. So start with it, don't end with it.
Okay, wonderful. I love it. I'm going to share I'm going to share. What am I going to share right here? I'm going to share a little video with you guys. So let's see if I can do this and escape out, get you guys in. I know there's a magic way to do this. This is our Active Aging Summit that's coming up July 24th and 25th. And this will give you a little bit information on it. Very exciting. And this is activeagingsummit.com. And you know, guys, we're going to go live in October, face to face, in person.
Wake up to the world you've been missing. Time to jump out of bed in the morning. No day, no life, now we're living. Can you feel it in the air that you're breathing? Time to show 'em what you're made of. Let's get back on track. Are you ready for a come on? Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all around? Welcome back. Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all around? Welcome back. Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all around? Are you ready now? You're lifting off the ground. Welcome back. No coming down. Can you feel it all around?
Love it. Love it. Can't wait to give you all a hug. Right, Alexis?
Yeah.
Can't wait. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Dane. And thank you, Chris Purple, for helping us run this. I'm Sara Kooperman. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Happy 4th of July, guys. Happy 4th.